What is your small town dark secret story? There was a woman who was cheating on her husband and got pregnant with him. When she has the child, it was quite clearly not the husband's child, so he kicked her out of the house. The woman broke down and went out drinking. Then when she was about to return to her husband, she picked her baby up, dropped it down a rubbish chute, and left it there. The next morning she remembered what she did and went back to find the baby, but of course only people with access to the chute can go inside, so she had to wait hours, possibly days, for someone to unlock it and go inside. The baby was long dead by then. The woman killed herself shortly after. This developed into a ghost story later. People say you can hear the baby crying from inside the rubbish chute, and you can hear the woman crying on one of the stairways. I don't know if it's considered a dark secret, but in the county I lived in from ages 10 to 18, we had a soldier die under some extremely questionable circumstances. They said he was high/drunk/experiencing mental distress and raided a nursery, the plant kind. They claimed he was attacked by wasps and ran. He called 911 several times and claimed that someone was chasing him and was trying to kidnap him. In the last 911 call, he said everything was fine. Suddenly, just 14 to 15 minutes later, he was struck by a woman who stopped and called 911. He was ran over 2 more times and died. The autopsy showed no signs of bee or wasp stings. The connection to the nursery is due to the fact that it was just up the road from where he died. The place was ransacked, pizza eaten, money taken, but his wallet and phone were sitting on the counter, undisturbed. However, the family was not okay with that explanation, especially because he had previously texted that there were some problems with the local boys, since the soldier wasn't from this part of the state. So the family had a private investigator look into it. They analyzed the 911 recordings and found several instances of other people talking in the background, though most of it couldn't be made out, except one. In the 911 call, where he told the operator that everything was fine, a male voice could be heard saying, "Tell her." And the nursery? There was no DNA, no fingerprints, no footprints that lead back to the soldier, even though his phone and wallet were there in the building. A lot of people, his family included, think he was killed by some of the local guys there after they got into a fight about something. They chased him down and caught him. He was able to run again after the final 911 call and was hit by a driver while trying to get help. And the police in the county covered the entire thing up because the boys involved were connected to the department somehow. Of the 3 drivers, none were charged for hitting/running over him. I think only the first driver stopped, but it was discovered that one of the other drivers was connected to the department either through family or friendship. It's a crazy story, but you can look it up. Just search Austin McGeo. I wouldn't be too surprised, since there is a lot of shady stuff happening in small town police departments, including covering up rapes that officers commit. I really hope his family gets him justice. A freshman with Asperger's was being abused by his family at home. He was a problem child and got in trouble on purpose, but no one went too hard on him because of his home life. He was a well-loved kid at school and in the community. One day just before holiday break in December, he was really sick, but his mom sent him to school anyway, locked him out of the house. He decided to try and get into one of the empty houses down the street, through the chimney. Now this kid was the size of a 2nd grader, but he was too big to fit through, since chimneys taper down thinner. Mom never answered her phone when the school reported him missing. Went a whole day without reporting her kid missing. No one knew what happened to him. It was about a month and a half before we knew what happened to him. We all thought he ran away, was alive somewhere, maybe went to his sister's house. Nope. Dead in a chimney. The schools organized an entire week of counseling and such. They wore pink for a day and hung devout little pink ribbons on pins for him, since his favorite color was pink. Everyone was hit really hard by it. That's how our small town started 2020. It hasn't gotten any better, as you can see. So weird that it's almost been a year now. A guy I went to high school with threw a trailer hitch at an indigenous woman and yelled "got one" when he did. She suffered terrible injuries and was in the hospital for months before eventually dying. She had some other health conditions that didn't make it easy for her to stay alive. He was being tried for aggravated assault first, then they brought it up to 2nd-degree murder. It's been brought down to manslaughter because they didn't have enough evidence to charge it as murder. He pleaded guilty to the manslaughter charge. My city is plagued with a major prejudice to the indigenous people. My family was the same way. I grew up thinking it was normal and said some terrible things. I realized I didn't even know why I had this hate. I did a 180 on that a while ago. This is how a lot of the town is, and the sad part is there are so many people in the city that are on this guy's side because she was going to die anyway, because they were just looking for hookers, or she was drunk, basically anything to cover up what they really mean, because she is native. Crap like this is normal here. The police have labeled some deaths as accidental drownings, even though it's clear that they didn't just fall into the river. Someone I knew was picked up and almost thrown in themselves if it wasn't for a stranger. Canada has a lot of issues like this already, the tragedies surrounding the indigenous people. But our city is one of the worst. Seeing people discarded like that makes me feel disgusted and guilty to have been proud to be Canadian. Town in Africa I visited as part of a UNA thing. Basically had a guy way back when who was running to clean up the area. Apparently there had been a lot of white murders, some ritualistic thing, where their ears were being cut off, and at the time, white voters had a lot more power than black voters there. Anyway, his campaign is he'll stop the white murders, and he gets elected on this hard on crime attitude, and suddenly, they stop. Everyone's super stoked, until time goes by, and they are not just reduced, but non-existent, overnight, with no real action or people brought to justice. Anyway, everyone starts investigating him. Eventually this spills over to a bunch of folks forming a bit of a mob and charging into his office to try find a ledger for paying off the gangland people. They don't find a ledger. They found an earbox. A popular yoga teacher, trainer slash studio owner known and respected not just here, but all over the US, was caught not only cheating on his second wife with his current GF and business partner, but it was revealed in the last year that he had groomed and raped the second wife's 17 years old niece. She didn't come forward until last year because he had said it was in the best interest of spirituality to keep it secret, and talking would ruin the spiritual bond gag. He still has his studio, his GF, his license to teach/train yogas, and is now getting a master's degree in psychology at a prestigious Ivy League school despite the allegations. I took teacher training with him several times and I can attest to the fact that he is pervy, but also that he's very charismatic and intelligent, getting people to drink the Kool-Aid, shell out the big bucks, and for his guru pies to fawn over him. Typical narcissistic garbage. This is a sad one to me. There was an older couple here who ran a halfway house for troubled kids who'd recently gotten out of juvie. They fostered a few as well. They were loved in the community, wonderful people. One of them had an older brother who was a gangbanger in the nearest big city. During a visit, he snuck his 15-year-old younger bro a handgun. Younger bro ended up holding up a local gas station and killed 3 people. One of them was my friend's cousin. The foster parents lost whatever credentials they needed to do what they did. The kids went back into the system, and the giant house has been abandoned since around 2009. About 10 years ago a lot of homeless people disappeared, and when the police did the investigation they found out a guy was kidnapping and eating those people. Police found his idiot and found a half-eaten body and bones from another person. People don't like to talk about it, but everyone knows what happened. This was around 15 years ago, but there was a sheriff's deputy that was seemingly a really cool guy. Friendly, cracked a lot of great jokes, etc. He was working at the local high school as a school resource officer, and was apparently almost universally well regarded. Well, it turns out that he repeatedly raped a 14-year-old. He told the boy that he'd kill his parents if he reported the officer. I don't remember all the details, but I believe this went on for weeks or months before it was found out, and the officer was arrested and eventually went to prison. About 30 years ago a local 8-year-old girl went missing during the annual carnival downtown. After a few days they found a suspect that was seen near the girl right before she went missing. The guy confessed to her horrific murder and rape and torture. He was the kid's next door neighbor and friend to the kid's dad. I'll spare the details, but it was really bad. He was convicted and sentenced to 40 years or so. After 8 years he was paroled and returned to the same house with his parents, right next door. Laws were a bit different then, to the family of the girl and former friend. About a week later the man never showed up at his parole office. His parents filed a missing persons report. Rumor has it that several friends of the victim's father took care of him. If you talk to them, they just say that they are sure that he won't be back. No one thought to look there. About a decade ago there was a crime spike here. It was really bad because one cartel tried to displace the other, and because we're a sleepy town across the border from the US, we are prime cartel real estate. However, when they weren't tearing each other up in the streets, they would abduct, interrogate, kill and dispose of the bodies of their rivals until eventually one cartel managed to keep the town. One thing that baffled the authorities was their stealth. They came out of nowhere, struck their target, and vanished into the shadows. That may be possible for a small unit or even a lone agent, but that's unheard of in a cartel. Federal investigations were made, and no one was able to find the cartel's HQ. It had to be big, because they had weapons, vehicles, metal shops, dorms, kitchens and the corpse disposal equipment. They looked everywhere, nearby ranches, warehouses, junkyards, nothing. Until they looked where no one thought to look. A few kilometers outside of here is a fully operational state prison that they were using as their HQ. Everyone was in on it, from the inmates to the guards to the warden to the governor. People were killed there, dissolved in acid and the drums were dumped in a nearby river. Since then the prison operation has been shut down, and the former governor is a wanted man by the Interpol. This is more comical than dark. A house burned down in this small town of 600 population. 1 block from the fire station. It being a volunteer fire department, nobody was at the station. They tried to get the pumper truck out, but one of the volunteers had run it into a brick building the week before, and it was still at the shop. We are still undecided whether the house owner burned it down for the insurance. Strange that there was nothing valuable inside. About 40% of my hometown was homeless. No one had jobs. No one could afford any kind of housing situation. Neighbors paid for heat where they could on houses people were squatting in, and everyone invited everyone else over for dinner every night. We didn't know who was homeless. We just did it. We hired anyone and everyone for odd jobs. A lot of people just lived as they would when they were kids. Keep the fireplace going with trees you chopped down, gathered water by the well and traded, farmed, and trapped for food. I went to school with a lot of homeless kids. We had, looking back, the most robust school breakfast program I've ever heard of. I thought it was normal for over half the school to show up, until I moved to the city. You just gave people the dignity they deserved. No one was shamed if they dropped out at grade 10. We all knew that if they needed the job they should take it. Looking back I realize how wild it is. Our town was so poor and no one was treated any different by me and mine at least. Sure, there were some rich people, but they overwhelmingly went to the other school. And there were no panhandlers, no beggars, nothing like that. I was just told the Buses were coming over for dinner. Did I like them? No, I kinda think they were dicks. But never did I make them feel uncomfortable, and most just ate, had some tea, and left. And if that doesn't tickle your fancy, a whale washed up on shore one week and all the guys in the local high school took turns having sex with it. All of them. We have a vineyard hill next to our village. On that hill there's a big wooden cross. Lots of people go there to drink, have a walk, or with their dogs, but almost nobody knows why the cross is here. During war, a vineyard keeper lived there with his son. His son was recruited, and the man was left alone. When war ended, his son survived and wanted to prank his dad by sneaking on him at night. But vineyard keeper saw him and thought he was a robber, so he grabbed his rifle and shot the robber. When he found out it was his son, it broke his heart. He dug a grave on top of the hill for his son and erected a big wooden cross next to the grave. When he was done, he laid next to his son and shot himself. From that day, no one worked on the vineyards, and there's a big wooden cross on top of the hill. Now, you can't even recognize there's a grave.